Okay, good. Let's get into this. So, very quickly, this video is going to be in particular about one big, very important thing, which is you follow the money about this entire food stamp situation. And when you do, you see some qualities that are very interesting because they kind of tell you exactly what's going on when it comes to who's going to win in this situation if food stamps are not paid out. Now, obviously, there's a massive group of people who lose, over 40 million individuals, over eight something billion dollars not paid out. But let's get right into it real quick. So here's basically the deal. In the first grouping of individuals that tend to win, it would actually be the US taxpayers for the most part when it comes to the middle class going and buying things. When you go ahead and have essentially a lot of these individuals, not going out and purchasing, food from places like, supermarkets, Walmart, Publix, Kroger, etc., that means the supply significantly decreases. Okay. Or sorry, the demand significantly decreases. When the demand decreases, you have a lot of supply. And when there's a lot of supply, the amount of items available to be purchased goes up, which means that the price has to go down. So the middle class are actually going to, and this is one of those weird things, see really good prices for that time period in which the food stamps are not paid out. And they're going to like that. They're going to like that a lot because to them, they're going to see things on the shelves that normally they would buy, like, anything from, soups to generalized food, this or that or whatever. And then all of a sudden, they're going to be a lot cheaper. And the middle class is going to be like, wow, you mean we pay these inflated prices because of food stamps? Now, at the same time, a lot of those individuals would have to buy those, necessities anyways, but it's just going to be a shock situation because you're going to see essentially a moment where a lot of people are not going ahead and purchasing the items that they normally would at that exact moment. Now, they'll ultimately purchase them, right? But you're going to see a big dip from them purchasing them right at that moment when food stamps would normally pay. So the food, is going to be one of those things where there's going to be extra of it. The price of it is going to go down because there's a lot of supply of it. And of course, the demand is not there to meet it. So the middle class for a short period will be some of the individuals who obviously really like that because when food prices and grocery stores are very expensive at the end of the day, you can imagine the middle class walking in and going like, holy cow, these are prices like pre-Biden. These are prices like end of Trump's first, 4 years. And that's going to be one of those things where the middle class are going to be like, whoa, if we didn't have to deal with all these food stamps and people on food stamps, would the prices be like this all the time? So that's one of the things you have to keep in mind. Now, with that said, the next group that tends to do well are the Wall Streeters who basically have created shorts or done speculative play. These are people that are the elites, the super wealthy, where they will bet against grocery markets, grocery stores, anything that could happen related to pre-Thanksgiving events. These are the types of individuals who basically will go ahead and buy something very, very cheap, and then they'll go ahead and sell it when it's up. And the bottom line is that these individuals are betting against the health and happiness of America. And these individuals tend to make a lot of money if they get it right. But getting it right is the very, very tricky part. So, for example, with that said, if you look at like the housing crisis, you had people who did shorts against that. You had people who did shorts against 9/11, so on and so forth. It's rare. It's like winning a mini version of a lottery, but if they get it right, they make a lot of money. Okay, next group. Doge is something that has a bit of a political win because they heavily wanted, it was Musk, Ramaswamy, back in the day that were pushing essentially a SNAP audit or reform. So they were pushing essentially that there was a lot of SNAP waste, a lot of food stamp waste. Basically they were saying that certain groups were getting far too much SNAP benefits, more so than others. You see a bunch of TikTokers out there going like, "Oh, there's this many of these people, this many of those people," but they were showing data that showed certain things about African American community. Something like 51% of households that were Muslim were receiving food stamps. So the bottom line was that they really heavily wanted to get away from the current food stamp model and go more towards essentially a model where able-bodied people are very, very likely to have to get off food stamps quickly or never be on them to begin with. So as a result of that, the Doge slash Ramaswamy slash Musk fiscal conservative political agenda is really going to like this, because what it is basically is part of the reforming process of food stamps. Now, when it comes to, at the end of the day, other groups that are going to really kind of profit off of this, that would be food banks, Samaritan centers, when it comes to donations, and I would say also basically any group that would be like a second harvesty kind of thing. All right, so right now, just so you know, a lot of the food banks are not doing well because the bigger food banks that receive government funding so far have already sucked a lot of the food that they can into basically their shelves. And ironically, for some reason, I don't know totally why this is going on, but basically the local places that would normally donate everything from like small grocery stores, big grocery stores, those gas stations that had food that they would donate and stuff like that. For some reason, they're not donating as much as they normally would. It's like they're holding on to it because they're a little worried how this whole thing is going to go down. They want to have extra on file, things like that. So as a result of that whole situation, what it kind of comes down to is we don't know exactly how this is going to come down, because we know the government is funding to have a lot of food sent directly to these food pantries, these second harvest facilities. But we also know that a lot of these grocers right now are holding on to their food and not donating it. So we're not sure exactly how this is going to come out. But at the end of the day, there is going to be a lot of funding that ends up in the pockets of basically those local food banks, local private charities, when it comes to obtaining and distributing food. And that's even if they have to just basically go to the grocery store and buy food. So just so you're aware, when these when these food banks, when these private charities run out of food to donate, they have to go to the grocery store and actually buy groceries to be able to supply to people who need them. And I don't mean just in the sense of they run out of one item or two items or whatever. You know, that happens all the time. Like at the Samaritan Resource Center where I work, I'm right next to the food stamp people when I'm meeting with the homeless. And, they run out of a particular item all the time. That's not uncommon. But what they were dealing with over the past couple of days is that they didn't have entire shelving units filled with anything. So they had to go to the grocery store and actually buy items. I don't know why the grocers are basically holding on to the food. I'm not totally sure what's exactly going on with that. Maybe if you know something that I don't, let me know, but it is something that's going on. Real quick, Princess Diana, the person who's been a member for the longest period, donated $5. I super appreciate that. Putting a big heart right there. She said, "Good morning. I got my check today. Hugs to your fur babies." Excellent. That's a check for Social Security, not a check for food stamps. So just for everybody aware, because obviously food stamps pay in November. With that said, I want to also talk about basically a final group that potentially will make money off of this situation: foreign interests. Sometimes foreign interests will make money off of it. There's a whole group of people who are not going to make money. Just to be kind of clear about this whole situation. So let me talk about those real quick so that you kind of know who the losers in this situation are when it comes to manufacturing. So the biggest one that's going to be hurt by not having food stamps available would very likely be Mexico. They're going to potentially lose about $750 million dollars or less because of avocados, tomatoes, strawberries, bell peppers, stuff like that. But some of these are a lot of core SNAP products that they're just not going to have access to, or that they're not going to sell once they're in the United States. Then another group would be Canada, potentially lose up to around $650 million dollars on, let's see, beef cuts, pork shoulders, canola oil, fresh vegetables, meat and dairy. That's kind of your staples for a lot of individuals who are on food stamps, need to buy stuff. Another group that's going to lose quite a bit would be $280 million to China. China's going to lose on frozen fish fillets, garlic apple juice, basically proteins, veggies, stuff like that. Next group that's going to lose money on this situation would be Brazil. They're going to lose up to around 220 million. Coffee that's not roasted, frozen beef, orange juice, breakfast essentials that people buy with food stamps. Then you have India. India is going to lose about $185 million because of this whole situation. Frozen shrimp, prawns, basmati rice, spices in general, stuff like that, kind of your seafood grains category. Then you're looking at Italy. Italy's going to lose around potentially 165 million because of the shutdown without food stamps being paid. What we're looking at is around 165 million loss for cheeses, olive oil, pasta, kind of your dairy and your oils category, somewhat bread as well. Chile can potentially lose around 130 million with fish fillets, meat, grapes, blueberries, seafood, berries in general. Okay. Peru will lose around 120 million with blueberries, avocados, grapes, kind of like your superfruit category, stuff like that. Colombia is going to lose around 110 million coffee, bananas, flowers. Guatemala will lose around 100 million bananas, raspberries, coffee. France, 92 million. Cheese and nuts, dairy, stuff like that. Australia, 88 million, right? So you get sheep meat, beef, just meats in general. Then we look at New Zealand. They're going to lose around 83 million frozen beef cuts, sheep meat. Thailand, 74 million will be lost, frozen shrimp, kind of your grains and seafood categories for them. Costa Rica, they're going to lose around 70 million with pineapples and bananas, tropical fruits. Indonesia, going to lose around 65 million palm oils, cocoa products. Ecuador, 59 million bananas and shrimp. Netherlands, it's going to lose around 52 million to 55 million cheese, processed vegetarian-based options. Philippines, around 55 million bananas and pineapples. We get Turkey, 46 million for hazelnuts and figs, right? Kind of Middle East area. Spain, right, going to Europe, lost 42 million around olive oil, almonds. Ireland, 40 million for cheeses and butters. Honduras, 37 million for bananas and melons. Argentina, 33 million for frozen beef. South America, 28 million, 33 million, 28 million for oranges and grapes. Malaysia will lose around 24 million from palm oil. Greece will lose around 22 million olive oil and feta cheese. Belgium, around 20 million for chocolates, cheese. And Germany, around 18 million for baked goods, sausages, kind of your cold processed foods. So just to be clear, there's a bleep and a half worth of countries that are going to lose money from this whole situation, which is why I kind of am confused. It does seem like Trump is leaning towards hey, we're not going to use this $6 billion to go ahead and fund essentially the the SNAP food stamps, which is weird to me because if all these countries are losing money in this scenario, not only does it hurt Trump's recent negotiations, and what's going on with tariffs and stuff like that, it hurts his recent negotiations for a stronger economy, both for other nations that interact with the US and the US. And also, to be fair, right, just to kind of clarify things, hurts the, medium long-term effect of a stable economy of people purchasing things that are taxable in the United States. So I'm not really sure why it appears that Trump is leaning in that direction, because look, if it were me and I were Trump, right? If I were if I were Trump, I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a cold because I was working with the homeless yesterday. If I were Trump, right, and I was in this position of, that's wonderful. If I was like that for a moment, I guess the thing for me is, at the end of the day, I'd want the economy to financially make as much money that could be taxed as quickly as possible. And even if food stamps get paid out and that is in rotation and taxes are occurring in some way, fashion, or form, whether it's to employ the people to service those food stamps or foods that are going to get taxed in some way, fashion, or form as a result of food stamps, even though there's, different rules and regulations there. My point with this whole situation is, and then of course there's the international relations. There's probably, there's probably over $1 billion. I mean, there's definitely over $1 billion worth of loss here just for the short period of time where essentially these countries that make products that we import to be sold are not going to be purchased because the food stamps are not being paid out. So I guess to be fair with this whole situation, just so you guys kind of understand my understanding, like financially, it doesn't make sense that the US would be supporting this situation. That's like not paying the retired. Like if you didn't pay the retired, although they're safe, they get their Social Security, just like the disabled, they're safe, but for the whole trust fund running out. But, so they're kind of quasi safe. I guess my point to this whole thing is, all right, let's say that we didn't pay the retired and the disabled. Do you know how many people would not be buying groceries? Do you know how many people would not be paying utilities? Do you know how many people would not be paying rent? Do you know how many people would not be buying gasoline, getting car repairs, etc.? It's millions upon millions of people. So to me, I just don't know. And this is the classic thing. This is what kind of upsets me about it. Like when you had essentially this whole situation with Doge, right, and the Social Security Administration, Doge was like, okay, we're gonna get rid of these thousands and thousands and thousands. We're just gonna cleave off. We're gonna fire, retire, furlough, as you know, this many thousands of people up front. And that's not how you do good business. I mean, that's how you do shock and awe politics. Granted, that's how you do it. But that's not how you do good business. The way you do good business is you measure everybody's ability to do the job that they've already been given. You innovate new things, new positions, new completion tasks to go ahead and make it more efficient, make it better, make it stronger. Every time you do a run, every time you do a check payment, you innovate a new way to make it more efficient. And then you promote the people that are doing great. The people that are doing okay, you just leave them where they're at. And the people that aren't doing well, you fire them. That's how you do it. But that's not how they've been doing this administration. This administration has been cut, slash, burn, and then figure it out. And I don't know why. Like, it's politically, they don't need to go this fast. They don't need to go this fast. They could have taken twice as much time to do the other thing and potentially have a better outcome. But again, I'm not a billionaire, so what do I know? You know what I mean? I'm not a billionaire. So, all right. With that said, I want to go through some of the other details here just so that you understand the specifics of who this is going to affect in a long-term sense. Now, grocery supermarkets, grocery stores, obviously SNAP redemption sites, 80% of SNAP benefits are spent at these locations. So just to be clear, like if you're wondering the greatest effect of this, it's going to be essentially where people buy groceries, and then secondary, those countries who basically, can't make money off of the products they've already shipped to the United States. Now, obviously, the people who are affected the most are the ones who can't buy food. But, at some point, they're going to have to pass something that gets food to these people. I mean, 211 is not a solution because that just leads to 911, and that's not acceptable. Convenience stores, also high SNAP usage. Discount retailers, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, that stuff, get a lot of it. Super centers, obviously, massive volume of SNAP people buying and doing that stuff. There's a bunch of Walmart people working for Walmart that are on SNAP benefits. Just is the way it is. Farmers markets, they're going to get a little bit of a rough ride here. Online grocery retailers like Amazon, although Amazon tends to be kind of expensive with certain items. Like when you go to buy things from them, sometimes it's just the prices don't make sense. Then you've got things like beverage wholesalers, soft drink categories, stuff like that. You've got, food wholesalers where you can buy bulk amounts of meat, stuff like that, or bulk amounts of berries. Beef, cattle, ranching, and meat processing, they're going to take a hit, because obviously if people go ahead and get their food stamps, let's say 10 days later after when they're supposed to and the government reopens, let's say it's just hypothetically it happens that way. I don't think people are going to be buying so much steak. I think people are going to be buying more so things to put on the shelf because they're worried, they're scared. But I could be wrong. They could buy a bunch of beef. Poultry farming, processing, they're going to take a hit. Hog farming, pork farming, dairy farming, dairy product manufacturing, bakery products, any bakers, bakery groups, they're going to take a hit. Snack foods, manufacturing, chips, crackers, all kinds of stuff. They're going to take a hit. Soft drinks, non-alcoholic beverages, they'll take a hit. Fruit and vegetable growers, all these little farms that make fruit, the big groups that make fruit as well. Grain, oilseed farming, fruit, vegetable preserving and canning. Remember, a lot of people buy the it's strawberry, spreads, blueberry spreads, stuff like that. Seafood product preparation is going to be really effed, totally and completely effed, because the problem with seafood is, obviously the lifespan on having that product hit the store and then people buying it, it's short. It's a very short lifespan for a lot of those products. And remember, just to get from where they need to go to where they need to be processed, to be then put into a store like a grocery store, you just don't get tons and tons of time with that stuff. I mean, some of them you do. Some of the things they pull out of the ocean, sure. But some of them you don't get a ton of time. So what's interesting is that the seafood market is really going to take a hit as a result of this. So aquaculture, farm fish, obviously. Food packaging and manufacturing, the groups that basically package the food, they wrap it, they cardboard it, stuff like that, they're going to take a hit. Truckers, lots of transportation people. And that's not just the over-the-road trucks. That's the box trucks, that's the farm equipment people, like all that kinds of stuff. They're going to take a hit as well. Then you get basically general agriculture, crop production. They're just, they're going to basically have one of these, boom, and then it will come back up. And we're expecting this. Where the government is basically, not giving people their food stamps. The time hits when they're supposed to, boom, a massive slam down. And then basically people are miserable down here. And then slowly we're seeing this. And then boom, the government reopens and it's up here again and people are spending again. But it's just that huge suck zone that's going to be really problematic for a lot of these individuals. But, everything from crop production, cereal production, retail trade, pharmacies, gas stations, snacks, because remember, the trucks have to use the diesel and the cars have to use the fuel. So, and then of course there's like the spices and the packaging that were the little plastic bottles that people put spices in. All of those industries are going to be negatively affected by this because it interrupts essentially their distribution, which is going to affect the bottom line of essentially how the economy is going to be viewed as safe by investors, which is not good for Trump because Trump's all about a good economy through capitalism. So again, I don't know why Trump is, I just don't get it. I get the whole like show Americans that there's too many people on food stamps and they're abusing food stamps kind of ideology. I get that. And yes, food stamps are abused. And yes, people are pissed because, there's a lot of moms out there that are also, they got 6 kids, 7 kids, 8 kids, 9 kids. Some of them are getting $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 checks, every month, just, between the food stamps and the WIC and whatever. And so, what's happening is that is a cultural in America. Don't think it's not a cultural thing. There's so many people that is generational. We've got generation after generation after generation because, they're having a lot of kids and the kids are having kids fast. Like people like me who go and get super educated, like, I'll probably have my first kid at like 42, 43. You know what I mean? Like that's a big gap there. That's multiple generations that could have, should have, would have happened, but it is what it is. So the bottom line is, with the food stamps, they have lots and lots of kids and they have lots and lots of kids more quickly. Right. And so as a result of that, you're seeing a culture that established based on food stamps. Moms would have a bunch of kids. They wouldn't have they wouldn't get married. The father's income wouldn't be considered. And then just rinse and rotate. So I get that. I get why the middle class is pissed about this because to their ideas and what they see is if they have 1 kid, if they have 2 kids, they have to go and work. They can't live off of food stamps. And to be fair, the model of marrying somebody isn't really working out as well for people because people make so little. Like here, if we look at, let me show you something real quick. If we look at what the average, what is the average? Okay, what does the average American male make per year? This is shocking to a lot of people, especially women. The median male earnings in 2024 was $71,090 compared to $57,520 for women. So, a lot of women who are especially looking to date people are shocked by this because they're like, I expect my man to earn at least $100,000, as his base and then get this and this and this on top of that and blah, 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 blah. And, a lot of men now are like, I ain't putting up with that. In fact, you see, especially on the left side, the liberal to woke side, there's a lot of articles coming out from these companies where they're like, where have the men gone? Why can't we find the men? Why aren't they at bars where we can date them? Why can't we find them? Why can't we interact with them? Why can't we meet them? And the reason is, and I'm just going to tell you because I know what's going on, because I have a bunch of friends that are in this situation. It's that men don't feel like they can afford women. And in order for men to invest in women, they have to feel like they have like an ownership thing in that woman. And men are at the point where they just kind of look at women as like, if they're dating them, it's their turn. You know what I mean? It's not forever. It's their turn. It's not necessarily their wife. It's not their ownership. They don't own that person, which is exactly what women wanted. Women wanted to not feel like they were owned and stuck in this position. But as a result of that, it's caused men to not really invest, and that's fair. Like if you don't actually own something, you're not going to spend as much money and time on it. That's just the way it works. Like if you rent a car, right? If you rent a car, like, you might drive that thing around, mess up the bumpers a bit, go really fast and see what, feels good. But at the end of the day, you're not going to spend any money on it. You know what I mean? You're not going to like, have lots of kids and then want to support that whole scenario, other than you would, hopefully be a good, honorable person, want to support the children. So as a result, to be fair, it caused a dilemma in the situation of everything: the ability to pay for food stamps, the ability for people to pay for FICA taxes, which are your retirement, your social security benefits, second taxes, which are basically, your self-employed taxes. So like, to be clear on this whole thing, just so you understand, because it is important, and I hope you understand this, the middle class are pissed. They're pissed about people receiving food stamps. Middle class want people to work anything, even if it's just 2 hours a day, even if it's just an hour a week. They want them to work. And it makes sense because they have to go to work, right? And the money they get, they can't really afford shit like they used to. So they're pissed. One of the things that really harms the food stampers, the disabled, the retired, the widows receiving benefits, the disabled child benefits receivers, what really hurts them is that the middle class, especially with Bidenomics, and I know some of you love Biden, that's fine. It's fine. I'm not trying to, it is what it is. You know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say here is, with Bidenomics, the middle class can't really afford to go on vacations anymore. So, okay, so those videos I make where I explain, like, what can the disabled not afford now? And it's depressing as all get out, because like, you just like, every year they can afford less. There was a time where the disabled could make investments, like literal land investments. That was a decade ago. Now, now that, and what's sad is that entire list of where the disabled were at, let's say, 3-4 years ago, is where the middle class is now getting to, as a result of such a terrible dollar's worth and a very, very bad economy. Now, Trump's doing a lot with international agreements, so it's going to get better. It's some of the best it is the best international trade agreements I've ever seen. It's the best international trade relations I've ever seen. So when you hear people argue about how like Trump is so terrible to all these countries and da 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 da, he's brokered the most peace. He's brokered the most international trade agreements that are beneficial for the United States out of any president I've ever seen. He is leaps, bounds, massive double jumps, if you're a video gamer, ahead of any other president when it comes to international relations. So, at the end of the day, but you got to remember, people who like only watch like hardcore right or hardcore left news, like ABC is like, it's pretty much that at this point. Like, if you just watch The View and get your life from The View, like you're going to have a very skewed understanding of what's actually going on. But like, at the end of the day, financially, things are going to get better. However, we do seem to get Pharaoh leveling events like COVID when Trump is in office. So I guess what I would say is this: the food stampers, the retired, the disabled, those individuals have to be very careful, because the more poor the middle class become, the more the middle class is going to hate those who receive benefits that don't have to work. And that's not a good thing, because the middle class is a loser in this situation. The benefit recipients are losers. And it doesn't help, guys. So if you're any of these individuals where you're on like, TikTok or whatever, basically crying and screaming that, that the working class have to pay for your children, it's not a good look. And I understand that a lot of you, if you do that, are doing it just for looks, doing it just for views, doing it for influence, right? I get it if you're doing that for that purpose, but just realize that injures your position to receive food stamps as an impoverished person. Because the first thing that's going to happen when you make one of those videos is that people in the middle class are going to report you, copy your stuff, send a disk, a USB jump drive, right, over to the investigative groups at HHS, at Social Security, right? The OIGs, Office of Inspector Generals, are going to get a video of that. And don't think with this whole situation that I'm not aware of what's going to criminally happen when food stamps are not paid. I'm fully aware that those who are like stealing are going to be reported to the Social Security Administration's OIG, are going to be reported to HHS, are going to be reported to multiple law enforcements. And guess what's going to happen to their benefits? They're going to get a full review, and many of them are going to be facing tough problems. So, the point that I get at with this situation is that maybe this is Trump's way of filtering who's really going to go ahead and receive benefits in the future. I don't know. It's just a very interesting situation. Rob White, thank you for the $1.99 donation. That's amazing. Let me put a heart in there. Walter, donate the crescents. There you go. Indeed. There you go. There you go. Right. All right. So with that said, before I give you my final thought on where I think this whole thing is going, I just want to say this. Please remember to like and subscribe. A lot of you guys don't hit the like button, and it affects the video. And then also, I don't do Medicare stuff. So if you have Medicare questions, give them a call. They can do a tune-up on your Medicare, 339-226-6287. Real simple. Here are my final thoughts on this situation. If Donald Trump is doing this to create a filter, to put as many able-bodied people onto the work train and off of food stamps, he's going to get mixed results, because the food stampers are probably going to riot to some degree. They're going to commit a lot of theft, and they're probably going to be using, honestly, their kids to go ahead and steal things from grocery stores. We see it all the time anyways already, so it is what it is. This is going to have a racially charged negative effect. You're going to see a significant amount of individuals in the African-American community, in the poor white community, in the Latino community, and the Muslim community looking very bad when you have tons of the middle class with their phones, basically taking videos of them stealing, having theft with groceries. So it's going to have a negative cultural effect too. Now, the next thing you need to keep in mind is that international trade is going to take a dip, which means products are going to be cheaper for the middle class, which means the middle class is going to have a quick little win followed by a longer loss. But that quick little win is when the Republicans are going to have to go ahead and do whatever they can to suck and boost that happiness for their voting population. It is my belief that food stamps will likely get paid. It is my belief that food stamps will likely get paid if the Democrats cave after a couple of days into November because people get really pissed, or when violence starts happening from the low poor class against the middle class, and we start seeing more Charlie Kirk level events. I mean, they wouldn't be at that level, but we would see events like that. They'd start building up. I think that would either create one of two things. Think about this. If we had middle class workers getting injured by the poor because the poor can't get food because they don't have food stamps and they've got to go to food banks and it makes it tougher for them. If we have that situation occur where people like Soros are funding massive, riots, etc. And remember, the riots right now are very calm. The riots right now, you're not hearing much about it. You're going to be seeing Antifa splattered all over the news come November 1st, November 2nd, November 3rd. So my point to you is, with all this stuff, as a result, I believe that some people will be injured as a result of the riots. Some people will be injured as a result of the poor not getting their food stamps. And that will bolster, right, the idea that they should reopen the government. Okay. I think some people will get injured. Only when enough people get injured will the Republicans maybe bend a knee a little bit. So you have two issues here. The Republicans will bend a knee when their voting class starts to get injured from those who can't afford food because they don't have food stamps. And the Democrats are likely to go ahead and essentially create, an opportunity for them to wiggle on some things, give up some things, etc., and, vote more with the Republicans. That'll happen only if people start to look more at the Democrats and blame them for this situation. But you better believe Soros is going to be paying that big money to get those people out there rioting, even though those people rioting are, a lot of them, getting paid to be there. Just like the FBI people who were at January 6th. Remember watching that? Holy cow. I sat there watching the FBI director, the FBI personnel talk about how they created a report essentially 3.5 years later that was going through a review process, but they didn't have it finalized yet, so they couldn't tell the senators and House reps how many FBI agents were actually at January 6th. And now we get it back. We find out over 200 agents were there, which blows my mind. So I guess just to be clear, just so that you understand, the people that are really going to these events are people who are not afraid to get photographed, people who are not afraid to potentially lose a benefit. Because, if they're going, think about it. If you have, and not that they don't have big, like, they're not, it's not like when Biden was getting in. If they had big, super large, Democrat oriented events that were open to the general public, you better believe somebody's probably walking around, because the Republicans are in office. They're not going to try and injure their recipients, but you better believe there's people walking around with facial recognition software capturing who's at these Democratic events and then reporting back, who was there, who was capable, video footage of what they were able to do, etc. That's OIG material left and right. Think about it. If you were to collect video on a person that's disabled that went to a Democratic event, right? Democrat, big events, people are screaming, jumping, laughing, listening to music, high-fiving, you go queen, you go king, boot, woo, 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 stuff like that. You can imagine the people that are walking through those crowds, collecting facial identification information, collecting video information, and then reporting that back to Congress. I mean, that's the world we live in now. And then if if the Republicans get kicked out at the end of Trump's 4 years, you bet the Democrats will be doing the same thing to them. It's the same thing. It's an unfortunate thing at this point. All right. With that said, I have a hearing coming up. I have to hop off of this video and get to work because they've got a hearing, and I've got to make sure they're ready to roll for it. Attorney Walter Hnot, the most viewed, subscribed to, and clicked on disability attorney in America when it comes to Social Security benefits. Please remember to like and subscribe. I will catch you later tonight where I go live for free. And then also, if you need a private consultation, mini contract is in the bio below, or you can email the law firm or give us a call or give us a text and we'll send it over. I'll catch you a little bit later. I'll see you soon at the next video. I think we have one again at 2 something. Thank you so much, Attorney Walter Hnot, and we'll go from there. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.